All right, gang, welcome. So here we are, we're module 8. And in the last couple of modules, we've dug deeper into queries, and dug deeper into creating these robust forms. Now, we've had a variety of reasons and rationales behind why we're doing these things. We want these databases to answer more complex questions, if you will. That's why we dug deep into queries. We want the user interface to be more robust for the user and easier for them to understand and interact with. Reduce the likelihood of compromising the integrity of our data. So with that said, this module, we're going to deal with something that I've mentioned a time or two, and that has to do with this. It's essentially the third ribbon. File's not actually a ribbon like the rest of them. External data. And we've had two ways. One is we can import data or we can export data. And I briefly talked about it a little bit in the past. Now, let's assume somebody has sent you a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet has data in it that you want to use to populate a table. There's some things that we need to know. And we have talked about it briefly in the past in the first few modules. And the most important thing is the form of the data. Or another way to word that is the data type within each column that we're dealing with. Do the columns have headings? Are we going to use those headings as column names? Do the rows have headings? Is there something that exists within the spreadsheet that we can use as a primary key? Is there a unique identifier in this information? Or are we going to create our own? These are all questions that we need to know before we even start thinking about importing data from a spreadsheet. Now that we've gone through the past 7 modules and we have a better understanding of the data and what data integrity is and what it takes to ask these questions of the data, what it means to have reliable data that you can query. Now we know what it takes if we're going to acquire data from somebody else. And the somebody else now is not one entry at a time. It's a bulk import of data. I could import thousands of records in a matter of a few clicks. As long as I know what it is that's coming in and the form and structure that it's coming in, then I can work with it to import it in as a table. Now, I may have to go run some queries on that table after the fact and modify some data and check to see if the data imported correctly. Were there any issues with the import? Did the data come in exactly how I expected it to come in? I can't just assume because I followed the directions of the wizard to import that everything happened the way I wanted it and expected it to happen. It's just that trust but verify philosophy. I trust that it did what it's supposed to do, but I need to go back and verify and make sure that it did in fact do what I expected it to do. So that's on the incoming side. Now, we've talked in the past about reports and why they're so important, because we're sharing our data with somebody else. Now, we've collected the data. This is a repository of the data. Now, it's not to say that we cannot perform calculations within our data, and we've done that. We've counted, we've aggregated within our reports, within queries. But let's say that somebody wants our data to use in the form of a spreadsheet so they can create some nice little bar charts, histograms, pie charts. They want to create visual representations of the data that we've created. Now, the data could be in the form of a table. I could export a table as a spreadsheet. I could export the results of a query as a spreadsheet. Not just a spreadsheet, but we see here we've got different options. Text file, extensible markup language, XML file, a PDF. I could email it. Okay. There's a number of things that we can do with our data. And we've got labs that'll walk you through a variety of these things in Chapter 8. And this is something that we don't do all the time, but we do it when needed because it can save us a vast amount of time. I would much rather import the data and have this wizard work it through for me than have to manually copy, paste, or type thousands of records. If you're having to type in thousands of records, there is the potential for typos, errors in input, errors in the data. Okay. So as we do our migration, keep in mind that the data is only as good as the person that input it into the originating file. So if that's a spreadsheet that it's coming in from, it could be an XML file, could be a text file. If there's an error in that data, if somebody typed it in incorrectly, that issue or that problem with the integrity of the data has now migrated into our database if we haven't caught it. Okay. So it's something that we do need to go through and scan this stuff and make sure it is the way that it's supposed to be. Now, it's not as reliable as we'd like it to be, but it is what it is. So, see you in the next module. These labs should be getting a little bit easier, a little bit easier, a little bit easier because we're, over the top of the hill, if you want to word it that way. We've only got 2 more modules of actual labs, and I'll see you in the next one, Module 9.